Hello, everybody. It's Suzi Craig from Mental Health Connecticut. We are almost wrapping up our 31 Days of Wellness for Mental Health Awareness Month. And as you know, we like to do a deep dive into topics that are outside the usual, maybe for some not usual, maybe they're usual for some, but maybe unusual for others, around how you can support your mental health journey, how you can increase your mental health fitness and awareness through things outside the clinical and medical realm, right? So we've been exploring topics like art and gardening and writing, and today we're talking about spirituality. So I have with us today Erica Thompson, who is the senior minister of the Asylum Hill Congregational Church in Hartford. I believe one of the oldest churches in the area, correct?
We are one of them. We are historic. We are about 155 years old. So
there you go. You're older than MHC. We're 112, so you beat us. But one thing that's amazing about Erica, she is the first woman senior minister at Asylum Hill Congregational Church, which is amazing. Another thing that is fantastic about Erica is that, you know, the way that she goes about building community and bringing her congregation together around inclusion and diversity, and she really has an eye on I would say a very broad vision of health and well-being of the community and her people. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to her about the intersection of spirituality and how that plays a part in someone's mental health journey. And you know, so really my first question to you, Erica, first, thank you for joining us. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be with you all.
Awesome. And really, if you could talk a little bit about your experiences in, you know, when we're struggling with our mental health, how does a practice of spirituality come into play? How can we support, you know, our well-being with a practice of spirituality, whatever that looks like, right? Because it'll be different for everyone. So
it's a great question. I would say first and foremost, I see a connection, a deep connection between mind and spirit. I see the two kind of residing within the same body. You know, so we have and I think, and so we are one body, and, you know, we really look at how do we take care of our mental health? How do we take care of our spiritual health? And so they are so interconnected. I think that certainly taking care of our mental health in ways that, you know, only doctors and clinicians and therapists can do is wonderful and necessary. But I think that there's a lot that we can do spiritually, and using you know, spiritual practices that end up having great benefit on our mental health. You know, I think that you know, in terms of practices like meditation, reflection, prayer, you know, and that looks different to every human being. You know, we often get caught up in this notion that quote unquote religious life has to look a certain way to be valid, or to and what I hope people understand is that, you know, spirituality is really just a conversation, a dialogue, a relationship with something that you know, I might call it God, you know, but it's about something that's greater and bigger than ourselves. And I think that being conscious of that and understanding that and connecting with that ends up being able to help us and help our mental health so much more than we know. And again, I'll go back to the, reflection, meditation, prayer. There's no right way of doing that. It's what is, it's what's helpful and healthy and feels right for any individual. And so, but I would say, especially in these times, I think it's so necessary that every single one of us is looking at all of the ways, like taking a holistic approach to the ways in which, all of the different things we're looking at. You were talking about, nutrition or nature or, spirituality, like all of it. If we're looking at all of it together, I think that's when we become the most healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I really love what you're saying. It's kind of taking this approach of not disconnecting the practice of spirituality with your health, but really integrating it and seeing it as a part of, your daily life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, I find even with my own self, when there's integration, it's when I feel the best. It's when I feel the least anxious, when I feel, the least amount of fear in my life. When I feel stronger and have a greater ability, to overcome, to be resilient, to to just do the things that I know I need to do. But for me, it's about, in terms of spiritual health, it's about connecting with, for me, sort of the source of existence, the source of who we are as human beings, and being able to, kind of figure out on a daily basis how I make that connection with, for me, it's, the divine, spirit, but sort of that source of life, because I feel like when we sense that we've been cut off, we feel very isolated, and I think that affects, again, I think our spiritual health, but then also our mental health and well-being.
Sure, absolutely. And earlier you and I were talking about, speaking of connection, the community connection, the wonderful community that I know that you have at Asylum Hill, has been tough for them because they have been, physically disconnected. And it sounds like you and your team have done a great job of doing everything you can virtually. But I'm wondering if you can talk about a little bit about, how the interplay of community connection supports your personal connection to, what you call the source, which I think is a great way to say it. How does being with others kind of support your own personal spiritual journey, and what's missing when you remove the feeling of community? Like, you're all still a community. It's not like that's changed, but like you were saying before, not being able to walk into the church and smell the coffee and like just see friends and like, that's things that maybe took for granted before and like didn't know that it played a part in our connection to, our spiritual practice. But
so I would start with, sort of a spiritual tenet, or I believe that we are all made in the image of the divine. And one of the best ways that I know how to connect with the divine spirit, source, God, is by seeing that in someone else. So when we are not able to do that, I think it's really difficult on people. When we're not able to be in that kind of community where we're able to see the holy kind of at work and in action in one another, it really takes a toll. And I think that actually is probably one of the best ways I know how to describe the power and importance of community, is that we actually, in being in relationship with one another, actually are able to see the divine so at work in the world. And so I noticed that we're what, 10 weeks in to this to the sort of isolation, social distancing, for some quarantine, and although our congregation and the staff team and the worship team is doing a fabulous job. We just overnight had to go from being this community of people that how we operated was doing things together, to overnight being a totally virtual community. And I think for a number of weeks, people were able to be grateful for what they had, which was this virtual community. And doing worship and programming and all sorts of things. We have wonderful gift of having technology and having live stream capability, and so we were able to do it much easier than I know a lot of other communities are really struggling. But I'm finding that just recently, people are not as enamored, should we say, with sort of the virtual church. And I believe that is because what they are missing in the virtual church is that connection, that physical, the hand holding, the hug, the just being able to see and to have conversation, and to, as I started, to really be able to deeply sense the divine in another person standing in front of them. And so I think we're seeing that this kind of prolonged time of social distancing is beginning to really take a toll on people's spiritual well-being and sense of, we're trying and it's good, but I can see it beginning to kind of wear on people.
For sure. Yeah, no, I can imagine. Well, thank you for doing all you're doing. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up, or...
I would invite people. We have a great, if you go to ahcc.org, which is our church's website, we do a lot of programming, live stream. We do our Sunday services at 10:15, but then we are sort of on-demand style. We've been curating and pushing everything over to our YouTube channel. So you can go to the YouTube channel, the AHCC YouTube channel, and everything that we've been doing is on there as well. So it's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll make sure we'll put those links in the blog. But great. There was something before that you mentioned earlier when we were talking, before I hit the record button. You mentioned something, what was it called? Taza or something? I never heard of.
Yep. So there's two things that might, in particular, they're during the week, and there are two programs. One is on Tuesday mornings at 10, and it's called a Spirituality Corner, and it's led by one of our clergy, and they're just different spiritual practices, everything from different methods of prayer to ways of engaging in spirituality through coloring.
Cool.
I mean, just all different. Each week is a different spiritual practice, which is wonderful. And then Thursdays at noon is a really spectacular live stream production of a Taizé service, which is it's about a 30-minute. We do it at noon so that people, if they are working, may be able to take a break at lunch. And it's a service that is really about music, and it's sort of like a song or chant that kind of goes over and over again. And we do, every service has about 5 or 6 of these that they last about 5 or 6 minutes a piece. But it's been a very beautiful way for people. And we know that people are going back and rewatching them, using them as part of their meditative practice. And some, we know there are a lot of people who can't watch it during the day, and so they go back at night as they're, taking in their own meditative process, and they'll just kind of put that on in the background. Really beautiful, beautiful Taizé, and Taizé comes from Taizé, France. So it's but it's just a beautiful way of engaging in prayer and kind of the spiritual practice of song.
I love that. I think we have to get creative with the virtual experience. And that sounds like something that, and especially if people are watching it over and over again, they're using it, bringing it into like their own daily practice. And I think that's been as we all learn as we go with Zoom and virtual webinars and interactive online workshops, MHC has been doing a ton of stuff around this, but we're learning, like, you have to keep creating and keep finding new ways to generate those experiences, because, it's a lot of the burden is on the person on the other side of the screen to then take that into, right?
Yep.
It's a lot of content production. How much of an interactive experience can you create? It's difficult, so it's great that you're getting creative.
Very difficult, but yeah, I mean, and I think we need to, as you said, we need to continue to like revise it, and and things that work for a little while may not work forever.
Yeah.
And, kind of bring in some new things, and so, but it's but those have been a beautiful way of. I will say it's also been one of the really cool things about the whole virtual experience is that, especially with people's like spiritual health and well-being, is that the barriers for entry are so much lower. And
yes.
So we're finding that that's been a wonderful way that we've been able to connect with more people, because those barriers are much lower. People aren't having to, figure out how to dress and where to go, and, oh my gosh, who's going to be there? And, that they can connect, which in some senses is great, because it's what we want. It's coming together and helping to support people's like spiritual lives without all of the trappings of, kind of our earthly human stuff, like the stuff that, sometimes won't allow us to go into that space. And so, I mean, I have to say that's been a really huge thing that we've learned, we've seen, is that the barriers for entry are much lower, and people are responding to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, the geographic barriers are coming down, right? It's, I think I was telling you earlier that I'm taking a class from this wonderful woman based in India. And it's the practice of Ayurveda, and it's a class I've been wanting to take for a very long time, but I just either, couldn't figure it out, or didn't really I've explored a bunch of programs, but this one landed in my lap, and it was exactly the person I wanted to take the practice from. And she's amazing, and she did it to make it accessible. She saw the opportunity to increase access to, you know, the knowledge around Ayurveda, and you know, it's awesome. I'm getting, you know, my butt out of bed at 5 a.m. every Saturday and Sunday, which is not easy for me, but but I'm doing it because I love the class, and you know, and it's an opportunity that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So it's
yeah,
you know.
I mean, it's, well, and we're finding that you know, the reach is just, you know, I mean, the reach might be right down the street, but the reach is also in Germany and Spain and Ecuador and California and Minnesota, and you know, so this, you know, the ability to, you know, really help people in their spiritual lives is it is a barrier. Access is so much better. Yeah,
That's great. Well, thank you, Erica, for taking the time to talk with me. It's a wonderful conversation, and thank you for everything you're doing. And you know, let us know how MHC can help and support you guys, and just thank you for being a part of the 31 Days of Wellness. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I love that you're doing this. It's wonderful, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Great.
Thanks
so much. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Bye.